Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Meryl Streep stars in the story of Florence Foster Jenkins, who is considered to be one of the worst singers ever. Socialite Florence Foster Jenkins, played by Meryl Streep, has had a long love of music and has always wanted to be a singer, training to be a soprano. Unfortunately, she cannot sing to an almost comical extreme. Regardless, her husband and manager, St. Clair Bayfield, played by Hugh Grant, supports her wishes by booking her into private venues with carefully controlled audiences, accompanied by flabbergasted pianist Cosme McMoon, played by Simon Helberg. However, Florence has her heart set on performing in Carnegie Hall, and as her notoriety grows, Bayfield struggles to protect her from discovering the limits of her talent. The idea of something being so bad it's good is quite a strange one because it's almost always by accident. It's never something that people intentionally set out to do, and if they do so, they normally end up failing. And that's because being bad is not abnormal. Anyone can do bad, but to do bad magnificently, to do so in a way that becomes transcendently bad, so much so that it arcs back round to being entertaining, that almost takes a perverse level of anti-talent. A lot of so bad it's good things normally come as a result of someone having an ambition to do something but not having the ability to accomplish that, and the actual lacking and distance between what they're trying to achieve and what they actually make is so great that it becomes quite comical. And so there is this element of schadenfreude about so bad it's good things, and a little bit of heartbreak. And for a lot of music fans, so bad it's good is normally referred to as Florence Foster Jenkins, this real-life opera singer. She was a socialite in New York City. She came from a fairly wealthy background. She had a lot of money. She put a lot of that into music. That was her passion in life. Her music was everything to her. The problem was that she herself was not very talented at singing. She had an early life playing piano, but that was later taken away from her, unfortunately, and she moved into singing. The thing with Florence, however, is that although she was a terrible singer, she couldn't actually tell that she was a bad singer. She thought that she was doing a good job of hitting all the right notes, as opposed to hitting all the wrong notes in the wrong order. And there is something quite entertaining about listening to Florence's recordings. If the recordings are out there, if you've listened to them, you won't forget them because they're quite remarkable and quite distinctive in just how off the mark they are. And so there is very much a story to be told about a figure like Florence Foster Jenkins. In fact, this is the second film to come out recently. There was a French film that came out last year called Marguerite, which was very loosely inspired by Foster Jenkins again. I think tonally you have to be very careful with this kind of material because in the wrong hands it can seem either cruel or mean-spirited, especially with certain details of Florence's life. And to the film's credit, it has Meryl Streep in the lead role, who, it goes without saying, is absolutely terrific, and she really plays the character with a great amount of gusto, and it's easy to see why Streep was attracted to play Jenkins, because it's a role that manages to be both comic and dramatic at the same time, and Streep is fantastic at both of those. If you've seen her filmography, you know that she's actually somewhat underrated as a comedian. She does comedy very, very well. There are a lot of laughs, for example, in the scenes where Florence sings. Streep is quite a solid singer, but I'd imagine it's very difficult to try and replicate a bad singer, especially one like Jenkins, where the notes are all over the place. And it is quite amusing to listen to. It's hard to resist. And Streep plays the character very well. There's no self-awareness here. She plays her almost like she's an innocent. She's oblivious to just how bad she is. And at the same time, that gives the character a real tragic quality, especially because the real life Jenkins, she did have a lot of tragedy in her life as well, because Jenkins, as is very quickly established in the film, is very ill. She has been living with illness for a very long time. She's been living with advanced syphilis for about 50 years now. She has very much had to live with the spectre of death hanging over her the entire time, and there is this real sadness and also this frailty to Florence. As the film progresses, especially towards the big Carnegie Hall performance, we begin to feel somewhat uncomfortable, especially as we know more about Jenkins, especially because the audience in the later stages of the film, they are being cruel, they are laughing at her, they're not in on the joke like some of her earlier audiences are. And there is a real sadness, and when Florence occasionally picks up on that, you do see in Streep's performance or just how damaging that can be to her identity and her sense of self, and it does feel quite hurtful, and it is quite upsetting in some ways. And I don't want to stress this because in general Florence Foster Jenkins is a very funny movie, but it is tinged with this bittersweet quality. But what I think helps the comedy is Simon Helberg's performance as the pianist Cosme McMoon that they bring in to play with her. Helberg is best known for his work on The Big Bang Theory, and he's also a pianist in real life, which allows them to actually use him playing piano in those scenes. And he's very much this outsider, this audience surrogate who's brought into Jenkins and Bayfield's world. And the first time he hears Jenkins sing, he's almost overcome with laughter and disbelief. But gradually across the film, he does strike up a friendship with her and Bayfield. And there is this quality of going out together and being able to support her no matter what her ambitions are. It's a little bit more of a dramatic role for Helberg than something on a sitcom, but it does use some of those techniques. Helberg, a lot of the time, is cut to during performances where he gives a perfect deadpan expression of trying to contain his disdain for what he's hearing as someone who has been trained in music. And he delivers that part of the movie very well. And whenever the movie's uncertain about its tone, Helberg corrects it to some extent. It always brings it back round to comedy. But the person who I was most impressed with in this movie was Hugh Grant as her husband Bayfield. Hugh Grant gets a lot of stick, I think, for not really acting, just playing variations on himself. I think this is probably one of the best performances that Hugh Grant has ever given, and he's given this very interesting character. He has to carry a lot of the dramatic material because he loves her, he supports her dream, but he's also aware of her shortcomings. He knows that she's a bad singer, but if it makes her happy, if it makes her feel better about herself, then he will support that dream. And their relationship is a very sad one in some ways because they can't physically consummate their love, and there is that discord in their relationship to some extent. But regardless, he's always very supportive of her. He tries to get her out there, but in a controlled fashion that can maintain this bubble that he's essentially built, that this is this happy world. And it's not because he's trying to hurt her in any way. It is because he's trying to protect her. He's trying to give her some space to do what she really loves, making sure that audiences are very positive. There is some humour in the fact that a lot of the reviews of Jenkins' performances are very euphemistic and very much about the courage that she had to come out and perform. And there is this idea that it is taking a toll on him, that there is a lot of things that he has to deal with, and he's been in this relationship for a long time. His character is actually having an affair. There he does have a girlfriend that he's keeping secret from Jenkins that is played by Rebecca Ferguson from Mission Impossible Rogue Nation in a little bit of an underdeveloped role. I don't think the movie judges Bayfield for having that affair. I think that's very important. It's fulfilling something that he can't get from Jenkins because he has to act as both lover and carer. And yeah, their relationship is somewhat built on a lie, but that's only because he does care for her. And I think when it comes to Grant, he's very much the heart of the film, especially because he's the most complex character in it. And that very much gives you the tone of the movie. And director Stephen Frears is in very much similar territory to Philomena, which was almost a tragic comedy, in that there were these comedic elements with Philomena, but you also felt the tragedy for her in the more emotional moments. And the same thing goes to Florence Foster Jenkins. And I think the film is very sympathetic and very kind in its worldview. It makes the argument that the world needed Jenkins, it needed her at that particular point in time, especially because it's 1944, a lot of these soldiers are coming back and they've seen terrible, horrible things, and they need some kind of entertainment, they need some sort of relief, and Jenkins provides that for them. It may not be in the way that she intended, but at the same time, she accomplishes what she sets out to do, and I think that's what's key to the movie. It's very supportive. It's very much got this message that one should go out and do whatever they want to do, no matter how good they are at it, so long as they fulfill themselves on a personal level. I'm not ashamed to admit that I did shed a few tears at the end of this movie. I did get quite emotional about it, and that is quite a hard thing for me to do. There are not a lot of films that provoke that reaction because I've seen so many films. And I think that speaks to the quality of Florence Foster Jenkins, the movie, that it managed to do that. It managed to hit all the right notes, unlike the titular character. I don't think you could ever describe this movie as being so bad it's good. It's just plain good. It's a really great, solid film. It's truly a comfortable, lovely, uplifting, but also heartbreaking film at the same time. Florence Foster Jenkins is a wonderful and bittersweet true story that brings both laughs and tears in equal measure. Meryl Streep is fantastic as usual as the titular singer, managing to make her both laughable but also sympathetic and tragic, and goes at the role with great gusto. Hugh Grant delivers one of the finest performances of his career as the husband who goes to great lengths for the woman he loves, despite the obstacles in his way and the toll it has taken on him, while Simon Helberg gives solid comic support as a confounded pianist. Stephen Frears directs with sympathy and affection, mixing drama with farce, giving it a throwback retro quality that's very charming, and the movie deserves a round of applause without irony. Coming up soon, Idris Elba in Bastille Day, the Angry Birds get their own movie, and the X-Men have to face Apocalypse. But until then, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.